Many of you in this room will know the story that we're about to tell. But what I want to do is just have a quick overview, a very brief walk through the last 5 years, the story of the Lucy Letby case, and what has happened since her initial trial and what now appears to be happening in the media and also in the world beyond the media, something that you might all be part of, a kind of citizen movement of sleuths and experts, armchair experts or actual experts, who have got involved in this really kind of genre-defining case. A brief history of Lucy Letby then to start. Lucy was, at the time that the crimes were committed in the Countess of Chester Hospital, according to the initial trial, was a nurse in her 20s. She seemed, by all intents and purposes, well-liked and lived a very normal life. The Countess of Chester was a struggling neonatal unit, and a cluster of deaths of babies in their care is what this case surrounds between June 2015 and June 2016. A diagram of suspicious events that cross-referenced the names of nurses on shift with these events made Lucy seem, at least, like the common denominator. We will probably return to this at some points during this evening. In May 2017, the police launched what they called Operation Hummingbird, a 10-month trial, and around 110 hours of jury deliberations later, the then eventually 33-year-old was convicted of the murder of 7 babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital and the attempted murder of 6 more. She was accused of injecting them with air, overfeeding them with milk, infusing air into their gastrointestinal tracts, poisoning them with insulin. The Daily Mail at the time said, "She has thrown open the door to hell, and the stench of evil overwhelms us all." She was served 15 mandatory life sentences and is currently serving these sentences just to the west of London. She was convicted also of attempting to murder another baby in a subsequent retrial with 1 charge in 2024, making her the most prolific child killer in modern times. And then the introduction of doubt. A 13,000-word New York article was published in May 2024, suppressed on these shores in the UK. In July of the same year, 24 experts in statistics, forensic science, neonatology wrote to the British government raising concerns over the way in which statistics and medical evidence were used in Letby's case. And since then, as you all probably know, momentum has grown. 2 parallel universes have revealed themselves. In one, Lucy Letby is a cold-blooded murderer, enabled by a chaotic health system. In the other, she is a victim of a grave miscarriage of justice, the scapegoat of a broken NHS. Neither version of events, of course, can undo the harm that happened to their families who lost their children. But has justice been served? Could Lucy Letby actually be innocent? Should someone else, in fact, be behind bars for the deaths of these babies? And most importantly, for tonight at least, is the original case sound? Or are there genuine grounds for appeal? So, joining us this evening to go over this very question are 4 brave debaters from both sides of the argument, upholding the case for the prosecution, and I commend them for entering what they might think of as a kind of lion's den of Lucy Letby trutherism, is Christopher Snowdon, head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and Ben Cole, a financial risk analyst and avid commenter on the Letby case. And offering a new defence, a cause for appeal, is our own investigations editor here at UnHerd, David Rose, and barrister Adam King, who's a specialist in serious and complex jury trials. You might notice that Mark MacDonald, who is assisting Lucy Letby in our new appeal, is not here tonight. He, I'm afraid, was taken up with travel commitments. He sends his apologies. We may still hear from him later. He has said he may well send in a question for the second half. And I know in this audience we have paediatricians, statisticians, sleuths, detectives, everything in between. So this promises to be a very lively and I hope constructive evening of conversation. We're going to speak for 45 minutes between the 5 of us. I'm going to sit here as an impartial adjudicator, and then we'll take a 10-minute break to grab a drink from the bar and come back. And then it's your turn. We want to hear from you. I'm going to waive my usual harshness on the difference between a comment and a question and allow comments for once. I'm making an exception for this. And then we will ask our speakers to respond to those comments as you bring them forward to us. I'll explain more about that second half when we get to it. But for now, what I'm asking of our speakers is the usual respectful but robust debate. This is obviously a deeply tragic case, no matter which way it ends, and we're here to lay out both cases fairly. So I also want them to explain what they're talking about. It's not Evans, it's lead prosecution expert, Dr. Dowie Evans, okay? So when we're speaking about people and things that the audience might not be aware of, let's try and make it clear for everyone. And finally, what I want to do is turn it over to you for an opening vote, because what I'm interested in is how the room is divided before we hear anything from our speakers. So, the original Letby verdict, safe or unsafe? Now, what I mean by that is a verdict that is reached on the basis of all the relevant facts of the matter after a fair trial. So, if you think the original Letby verdict, in which she was found guilty, was safe, please raise your hand. Phoebe's just going to do a quick head count. About 12. And if you think it was unsafe, please raise your hand. So we've got a clear majority of those in the room who believe that it was an unsafe verdict. Of course, this might be expected. There is a bigger hill to climb here for Christopher Snowdon and Ben Cole, but that is exactly why we've brought them here. So I'm actually going to start with them and ask them, I've given them a little bit of time to think about this before we came on tonight, what they think of as the kind of smoking guns of the Letby case. What are the hardest pieces of evidence to refute by the other side in this attempt to gain another appeal? So, Christopher, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, firstly, I think it's very important not to trivialise this horrendous case or turn it into entertainment. The families have made it very clear that they are appalled by the circus that's been going on for the last year or so. Letby now incredibly has a PR firm working for her. The reality is that 6 families, whatever you think about this case, 6 families lost a child in the most horrific circumstances. At least 2 children now growing up with life-changing injuries. I am conscious that just by participating in this, I could be seen as in some way keeping that circus rolling. That's not my intention or Ben's intention. We are hoping to try and bring it to a halt. I suspect we won't be able to do that this evening, but that is our intention. People often ask on social media, you know, what's the smoking gun? What's the one piece of evidence that you think is most compelling, or you think convicts her? It's I'm afraid a silly question in a 10-month trial with so much evidence. I will try and get the ball rolling. We're going to have to group these things together because there is such a huge amount of circumstantial evidence in this case. I will start things off by saying I think it's a lying. I don't think that innocent people lie in court or to the police. They can be forgiven perhaps the occasional slip up, but Letby lied repeatedly. She falsified medical records in very suspicious ways that I think were designed to throw anyone who was investigating these crimes off the scent. Some of the lies were kind of weird and served very little purpose. She lied, for example, by text message to her colleagues about baby A's father collapsing and crying on the floor, which both the parents denied ever happened. She denied to the police in her first interrogation that she could remember anything about baby D at all. She was searching up baby D's parents on Facebook months and months after baby D died, and actually baby D was a very memorable death. All of these, I think, actually were memorable to the nurses and doctors there, but the baby D in particular, not least because she was a full-term baby, unlike most of the rest. She lied to the police when she said that she didn't really know anything about air embolism. She thought it was something that only happened to adults. She wasn't aware of anything related to babies, and yet a week or 2 before baby A died, she'd taken a course which highlighted the risks of air embolism, which you may think is in fact quite a significant piece of information. And she also texted one of her colleagues while baby O was collapsing, or before baby O collapsed, warning of the risk of air embolism because a cannula had been left open. I think this is one of several examples actually of Letby planting the seeds of doubt in the minds of her colleagues about what was about to happen. She did the same thing after baby O died, incidentally, in which she said, I'm very worried about baby P and baby Q because they're identical triplets. Her intention was to kill all three of them. She only was prevented from killing the third triplet because he was taken away from the hospital at the insistence of consultants who could see what was going on. Baby I was a very clear case of lying that came up in court. She'd been attacking Baby I several times. Baby I was attacked 4 times before she finally died. And she lied when she told a colleague that she could see her face and that she was really pale. There's no way that she could have seen her face. The room was too dark. There was no disputing this. And she slips up in court when asked about that. She lied. She changed medical records for Baby O again. Wrote on the Datix form that the IV line had been not in place. This was very quickly corrected by, I think, Dr. Purdy, certainly one of the consultants there. Why don't you do that? Well, because if the IV line isn't in place, you can't kill a baby with air embolism. These lies were not random. And then there was Baby E, of course. Baby E, those of you who know about the case, she attacked Baby E. There was blood all around the mouth. When her mother came up, she was screaming. Apparently an absolutely horrendous scene, screaming like this woman had never heard before. Lucy Letby was just sat there doing nothing. Said, trust me, I'm a nurse. Don't worry about it. Within a few hours, baby was dead. Lucy Letby changed the time of that bleed from 9 o'clock at night to 10 o'clock at night. And we only know this for sure because baby's mother rang her husband just after that incident, and the phone records say that it was just after 9 o'clock. So again, she lied. She lied all the time. She's a very clever woman, Lucy Letby, but she's not quite that clever. She slips up. She was very good in the witness box by and large, but she slipped up, and she claimed to not remember things that anybody would have remembered. That's my first piece of evidence. She lied. Innocent people don't.
Take a moment there before we turn to Ben, and I will turn to the other side just to get some rebuttal and response to that. Do Letby's apparent lies undermine her case?
There's a very famous direction that is given to juries in cases where lies are alleged, which comes from the case of VYE, V-Y-E, I think it is, where juries are told that they must not put too much weight on apparent lies. It was recognised by the Court of Appeal at the time of that case that there's a real risk that juries will put too much weight on it. Innocent people, juries are always told when this subject comes up, innocent people also lie. So there's that. I'd also say that the supposed lies that Christopher's just set out could very easily, and I would say much more likely, be described as inaccuracies. It's very common for inaccuracies to arise in any criminal case, inaccuracies on the part of the defendant. And very often the Crown, and this is speaking from my own experience prosecuting, when you try and put too much weight on what you think is a lie because you think the defendant is guilty or you've got yourself into that mindset, and you put forward inaccuracies as lies, it doesn't actually often go your way. I would suggest the jury probably didn't put all that much weight on the things you've just described. I mean, you know, claiming to have seen a face in a dark room. Can that really be described as a lie? Falsifying medical records, might it not be getting some of the details wrong, writing 10 o'clock rather than 9 o'clock? I mean, for Christopher to put that forward as the big reason why he thinks she's guilty, I suggest illustrates the weakness of his case.
Ben, let's turn to you. What is your so-called smoking gun?
Okay, so there were 3 unanimous verdicts given by the jury for babies F, L and O. And I'm going to focus on babies F and L, which were the insulin cases. I've seen what the Shuley panel and also a separate team assembled by Mark McDonald have said about the insulin cases. And I'm just going to go through them one by one based on what they've said. Initially, this is going to be focused on the latest report that was given by the likes of Dr. Ismail and Dr. Ayton. So the first one is, they said, the medical facts, they said there was evidence for sepsis, leakage of the central lines into the surrounding tissues, and consideration of alternative causes for the hypoglycemia. Now, sepsis was mentioned when it comes to baby F, but the only reason it was mentioned is because they didn't understand why there was hypoglycemia. And when you look into it, sepsis also doesn't explain high insulin and low C-peptide. Sepsis-induced hypoglycemia is low insulin and low C-peptide. And also, there's nothing in the notes that suggests that baby L had sepsis, so it's not applicable to baby L. Moving on to the next point they make, they say there are evidential facts. There are errors in the glucose results presented, changes in the glucose levels in response to the TPN infusion, and also the ward-based glucose test presented as if they were laboratory results. So what I want to say about this point is that having read the transcripts, I've read the transcripts of the prosecution experts, the paediatrics endocrinologist Peter Hindmarsh, and it's quite clear when you read the transcripts that he differentiated between what was the near patients, the heel prick blood glucose tests, and what is the laboratory test. So there was separate tests done in terms of the heel prick test and the laboratory tests. And he was actually questioned about a discrepancy. So there was a discrepancy of 0.8 between the tests. And he said, so why is this discrepancy? And Peter Hindmarsh said, in line with standards, it's perfectly acceptable that there is at least a 0.8 discrepancy between those tests. So to my mind, there was a clear, when you presented to the jury, there was a clear discrepancy between what is heel prick tests and what is laboratory tests and what those tests, the results of those tests meant. The next one is testing. That the test results of the immunoassay are unreliable, and that the Roche immunoassay method used at the Royal Liverpool Hospital is not specific in terms of exogenous or endogenous insulin. So my response to this is, there's a case example. It's the case example of Deborah Windsor. She was convicted in the early 2000s. It initially went to the Court of Appeal. They rejected what was said. It went to the CCRC. They deliberated for numerous years. And eventually it went back to the Court of Appeal in around about 2017. And the argument was that the immunoassay test results are unreliable. And in fact, one of the defence experts, who has now done part of the report for Lucy Letby, is Dr. Ismail. And he argued that the test results, I think it was something like, there's an error rate of between 0.5 and 8% in terms of the immunoassay tests. And there were also various other arguments made. Ultimately, when the CCRC looked at it, they said, actually, the clinical condition of the patient combined with the results of the immunoassay test mean that it was exogenous insulin, endogenous insulin.
Let's take a moment just to pause on the insulin question, because that does feel particularly controversial and needs to be addressed. So explain to the audience why, in that case, Ben isn't right, and that question of the insulin is actually one that should be coming under greater scrutiny.
Well, I think, to stand back a little bit, there's a very important point to make, first of all, in regard to the babies allegedly poisoned by insulin, which is that nobody has really satisfactorily explained how on earth Lucy Letby could have introduced synthetic insulin into feed bags that these babies were receiving through IV lines. It's been suggested that she had somehow spiked these bags in sufficient quantities so that individual babies will be sure to get the spiked bags with the insulin. But the mechanism by which this apparently happened has never been described and is pure conjecture. Now, in a case where the judge has instructed the jury, as was the case with Lucy Letby, that they don't have to be sure how Lucy Letby killed a baby or tried to kill a baby, then of course that gets the prosecution off the hook. Now, it's fair to say that the Court of Appeal has already rejected the direction that was given by the judge to this effect as a ground of appeal. But nevertheless, when you think about it, it creates fantastic leeway for the prosecution. It means they can say virtually anything about Lucy Letby apparently doing something that poisons or in some other way damages the child, and there's simply no way of verifying this. It doesn't have to be verified, because if the jury decides that Lucy Letby is an evil woman who goes around killing babies, then you don't have to prove that. Now, beyond that...
Do not adjust your TV sets, folks. That is simply the end of your free trial. All you need to do to see the rest of this event and get everything else that UnHerd has to offer is subscribe. It's really easy. The link's just down there. And it's £3 for your first 3 months, which I, for one, think is a very good deal. You'll get everything that UnHerd has to offer, whether it's essays, documentary films, and our beautiful events here at the UnHerd Club. So I'd highly recommend it.